Meeting for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. Ms. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Councilman De La Garza.
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis is not in attendance tonight. Councilman Crocker.
Here.
Councilwoman Scott.
Here.
Councilman Young.
Here.
Councilman Lofgren.
Here.
And Mayor Bachnight.
Here. At this time, if y'all would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, Texas Pledge of Allegiance, and then followed by a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor thy Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Again, welcome to everybody. If you haven't filled out a comment card, if you want to speak tonight, just fill out a card and make sure that you can speak at citizens communication time. Mr. Garza, do we have any announcements or reminders tonight?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Nothing on my part.
Okay. Public employee recognitions?
No, sir.
No, none of that. Okay, items from council. Go around the horn. Anybody? A quiet bunch tonight. All right. Well, let's go on to citizens communication then. We have three individuals. We have Mr. Van der Rohe first tonight. Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor, no Mayor Pro Tem anymore, okay. We have a problem with loose dogs, and I just wanted to tell you how you can file a citizen's complaint. You just go to the municipal court, and you also have to file a dangerous dog affidavit if a dog bites you. And a lot of people are saying, well, why isn't animal control doing anything about all these dog bite cases? Well, the person that gets bit has to file a dangerous dog affidavit. And a lot of times the person that gets bit doesn't even know that. They're in the hospital and they come back a month later and that same dog that bit them still running around, and they're wondering, why didn't animal control take care of it? Well, you have to sign a dangerous dog affidavit, and most people don't know that. We've had 652 dog bites from 2014 to 2019. That's about 110 dog bites a year. That's in Victoria County. And that's an average of one dog bite per 4 days. And the dog owners, they're not being held accountable or responsible. Normally, the way animal control does it, they give them a $75 non-judicial, non-criminal ticket, which don't count against them. They pay the $75 and let them go. If the dog is vaccinated and all the shots are in order and it's been spayed and neutered, the fine is only $25. They pay the $25 and then release it again. I've had a neighbor in 4 months who let his dog go 3 times, and you would think after the 3rd time, animal control would have a hearing or call it a nuisance pet or something. You know, it just gets ridiculous. So I'm going to start doing things different. I'm just going to start filing citizens complaint, with the municipal court judge, and just take it out of animal control's hand and let the municipal judge handle it. And I could also file it in the appropriate JP court. And the dogs that did bite the police officers, they will be held accountable, and the owner. But I would like to see some Class C misdemeanor charges, like if a dog bites you but it's not real serious, where animal control or a police officer could file with the municipal court or the JP court, like some Class C misdemeanors where they don't have to go through the district attorney, because the dog owners aren't being responsible. They're not being accountable, and it hasn't been. In our trailer park, there's a bulldog and a pit bull running loose all the time, but I got my mace and my bat. I'm ready for it. Thanks, and have a good evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Rohe. Ms. Ann Rikers. Remember, as we go through these remarks, keep them to 3 minutes, like Mr. Von der Rod did, please.
Ann Rickers, 101 Hampton Court. Good evening. Homeowners, public schools, and cities of Texas became victims in 1997 when legislatures changed the property tax laws. Suddenly, commercial properties could lower their tax contributions substantially as a median of comparable properties. For the first time in history, Texas property tax was no longer based on market value. New superstores and refineries worth 10 times more than comparable stores and refineries could median down its evaluation. As money tightened, tax districts statewide aggressively raised evaluations. ISD gave no quarter, and the state lowered their contribution to schools. Many businesses closed, and landlords asked for lower evaluations on empty buildings. More businesses could median down. Tax districts continued to raise evaluations, but now homeowners are shouldering the tax load disproportionately. VISD board and the city have lost empathy for homeowners. VISD raised rates after Harvey, and the city has raised rates during the COVID disaster. My point is, homeowners are suffering, and the city council needs a mindset change. Other cities have put solar installations on their buildings. Besides personnel, electricity is usually the highest expense. Austin ISD has solar installations on 45 of their 130 schools. Austin's power company gives about $110 million a year to their city. If Victoria sought the same opportunities, Victoria Power would exist and give $13 million a year to the city of Victoria. Use the American Rescue Act fund, purchase at least one solar installation on a city building, reinvest the savings in more energy-saving projects. A grant is the best possible start to a self-funding program. I thought a 3-year return on investment possible until I discovered demand charge. Cedar International Academy in Texas claims a 5-year return on solar investment. That is likely correct when using grant money. Sweetwater Energy, a local solar vendor, can assure the council that his solar installations survived both hurricanes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Richter. Last one is Mr. Rendon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. Thank you for taking the time to hear me out. I'll be real brief. We've been in business since 2014. My brother started the company back at that time. I partnered with him in 2016, took it over, and brought it to Victoria in 2017. If you were to talk to the folks at VEC and all the local representatives here at AEP, both of them will contest that we do stellar installation services for our clients. One of the things I'm absolutely proud of is the fact that unlike many of our competitors, we don't take any shortcuts, we don't take any short changes, and we have an incredible CSI, Customer Satisfaction Index, across the board. Many of you may know Judge Annie Ramos. Her son is one of my partners, and he's also one of my clients. In fact, he became a customer first, and then he became a partner afterwards to work with us. We installed his system August 9th of 2017, literally a handful of days. I think it was 8 days before Hurricane Harvey came in. At that time, nobody anticipated that we were going to have an impact relatively that soon. Of course, as anybody else would expect, he got nervous and scared and what's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I assured him, I said, look, we've installed, at that time we had installed over 350 systems all across South Texas, and the systems we have installed have all survived hurricanes. Mainly because all of our systems are designed and engineered to withstand 130 mile an hour gale force winds. They're all stamped and approved. In fact, I see Mr. Ricky back here, Rick, who runs y'all city, and we do a lot of our paperwork with him, and he can attest that everything that we do when we turn in is engineered. And when we actually install it, we install it the way it was engineered, and that's why we've never had any suffering. All of the panels we use are tier 1. A lot of folks, maybe you don't even know what that means in a simple sentence. It can withstand impacts. We've got systems installed right now on the golf course that get hit by golf balls all the time and no damage. If anybody cares to see any further information, I'd be happy to share more details with you. I've got actual videos where we've done tests, where we've impacted them with golf ball sized hailstones. I've shown them how we can actually get up there. I'm a fat boy. I get up on the roof and I can jump on top of these solar panels. We've actually driven a truck over them. And I've got video documentation of that. And it's crazy. But a lot of it is because of ignorance. And I don't mean that in the ugly term. I mean it in the literal term, where people just aren't aware of what's available to there. In fact, I also have a current bill from one of my customers, Warrior Supply, and in 1 month they had a $4,627 credit. Unfortunately, the school districts don't qualify for the tax benefits, but it will still save money. I've already prepared a program for them to look at, and we'll be talking about that Thursday. Thank you for the time. Look at solar. It's worth the money.
Thank you, Mr. Rendon. All right, those are the three we had registered for citizens' communication. So at this time, we'll close citizens' communication and go on with items with public hearings, C1.
Item C1 is an ordinance amending the 2021-2022 budget of the City of Victoria and carrying forward encumbrances outstanding at September 30th, 2021.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're going to be presenting an ordinance to amend the fiscal 22 budget for fiscal 21 carryover encumbrances, which are totaling just under $8 million, and there's a list of those that was included in y'all's packet. This is an item that we present each year for any contracts or purchase orders that are still outstanding as of our fiscal year end, which was September 30th. We do have a legal commitment for these items, so therefore, once the goods are received or services rendered, we do have to pay for them. Just a little bit about the process. We do start this in August. We discussed it with the departments, which POs and contracts need to be carried over. The reason why there is a little bit of a delay before we bring it to council for approval is just waiting on those final invoices to come in so that we can give y'all an accurate number of what actually is being carried over into the new fiscal year. This item is not going to affect the fiscal 22 adopted budget. All these carryovers will also bring in the budget from the prior year. And what I mean by that is when we put the budget together last year, we had considered these purchase orders and contracts fully expended last year. So they were already taken out of fund balance. Therefore, we're just adding it into the budget. And what you'll see in our financial statements is there'll be an undesignated or unrestricted line in our beginning fund balance, and then a designated fund balance line that represents these carryover encumbrances. And truthfully, the encumbrance carryover, it's presented as a budget amendment, but really it's just a matter of financial transparency, since, like I said, that legal commitment already exists. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? All right, entertain a motion.
Have a public hearing?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Scott. At this time, I'd like to open a public hearing on the item C1. Anybody wishing to speak on it, please step forward. Seeing nobody rise up, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move to adopt C1.
Second.
Great. Had a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries to pass, to approve. Onto the consent agenda.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting on November 2nd, 2021. Item D2 is a resolution reappointing members to the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation Board of Directors. Item D3 is a resolution casting votes for the appointment of a member to the Victoria County Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. Item D4 is a resolution approving the purchase of a Trimble X7 Laser Scanner system from AllTerra Central in the amount of $50,668.39. Item D5 is a resolution approving the payment of TCEQ annual consolidated water quality assessment fee for wastewater treatment plants in the amount of $114,324.67. And item D6 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Sherarrium's Company in the amount of $76,150.78.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Move we adopt the consent agenda.
I second.
Thank you. Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution hearing an appeal of Building and Standards Commission's demolition order for 405 West Juan Lynn Street.
Good evening. I just wanted to let council know that the property owner actually withdrew this appeal due to the severe fire damage that occurred in the building yesterday. I did want to take this moment to just let council know that as we go through and are so much more active on our Building Standards Commission and have a lot more orders, and as we're going through the court of record updates, our implementation with our municipal court and our UDO, that we're going to take this opportunity to completely redo our Building Standards Commission ordinance to make sure that we're in compliance with state law. It's a pretty simple ordinance. It's actually just copied and pasted from state law, and we're going to make sure that that's all still accurate. Right now, we do have one substantive change that we're going to bring forward to council, and that is that we're going to ask council to enact an attendance policy. We don't currently have any problems with our commissioners not attending, but we have had that problem in the past. And so we'll be asking for bylaws and a proposed ordinance dealing with all of our Building Standards Commissions probably around February, if all goes well. So I just want to take time to let y'all know.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fulgram?
I guess I'd like to just kind of make a comment because I think this might be the same building that there was an article in the paper and there had been a fire. And it made me really appreciative of everybody involved in the whole process of handling substandard buildings and in handling the ultimate demolition or repair. Looking at the article in the paper, there were 18 people that attended that. There were 18 people that were put in harm's way because of a fire in a building that had already been declared as substandard. And so I really applaud our procedure and hope that we can continue, perhaps make it more efficient.
Thank you. Well said, Ms. Scott. All right, so with that, we'll just let this item die because there's no reason to take it up, and we'll move on to item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution authorizing an application to the Economic Development Administration's Economic Adjustment Assistance Program in an approximate amount of $1,618,600 for the citywide LED street lighting project, committing city match requirement and identifying the source of funding for the match.
And Ms. Conley's going to give us a presentation on all three of the grants right now, and then we can vote after that
Yes,
on
sir.
each one individually.
Exactly. So these are the authorizing resolutions that we do for all state and federal grants that set forth that the city manager has authorized it, that he is the authorized representative, that we have the match and where the funding is coming from. That's all that's in the resolution that's attached to these items. This presentation is going to run through just to briefly summarize the three applications that we have pending right now. The resolutions have to be attached to the submission, which is why we're doing this before we quite finish the actual applications. Which one of these works for this one? So the first one is a downtown sidewalk improvement project, which is going to be submitted to the Economic Adjustment Assistance Notice of Funding Opportunity. The total project cost right now is estimated at $5 million. We're asking for a 75-25 split. That's a little better than the 80-20 that's required, which means that the federal share would be 3.75 and our share would be 1.25 million. This project will upgrade and add sidewalks, standardized lighting signals and utilities, add bulb outs for on-street parking, add decorative lighting, crosswalks, trees, grass, and irrigation. And the important points are extending the Victoria's perceived downtown core to create additional economic development opportunities. There's a lot that goes along with the economic development opportunity in terms of what the city's already invested, what that's meant for people downtown, for businesses downtown, and what our future expansions and investments are going to mean for the improvement in downtown. And I have a slide here that shows, and this is really small, I'm sorry, because it's actually kind of a long stretch of Main Street and Bridge Street where the sidewalks are going to be added and upgraded, where the bulb outs are going to go. The little black hash marks that you see along Main, kind of at Goodwin and Forest and Constitution and Santa Rosa, the little black ones, those are going to be the stamped decorative crossings. And then you can see the bulb outs that are going to help the on-street parking. There's a lot of landscaping and irrigation. There's some drainage that's going to go into this project. And that's a list of the streets that we have identified for this project.
And I'll just briefly add on that project that this stems right out of the downtown master plan.
Yeah.
You may recall a downtown master plan identifies a primary corridor for our downtown. And literally the location of these sidewalk improvements is consistent with that primary corridor. And so this grant is one step towards the direction of implementation of the downtown master plan, which is really focusing on that primary corridor.
Next, we have the citywide LED lighting project. This one is approximately 1.618,600. Again, we're going with a 75-25 cost share on this, which means we would be asking for the EDA to cover just over 1.2 million, and we would cover the 404,000. And what this is going to do is replace the high-pressure sodium lights. HPS is for high-pressure sodium. Some of them are actually mercury vapor lights, too. I have learned an incredible amount about city lighting from AEP over the past few months. But obviously, the LED lights represent cost savings and an increase in brightness. We'll replace some of the fixture arms for consistency. I'm sure you've noticed that TxDOT's replaced some of them along some of our Rio Grande and Stockbauer and some other, and so they're not consistent. So they'll replace those where it makes sense and we have the right of way and it'll fit and the pole will take the weight of the arm. We'll replace those to match. We'll trim away obstructing trees. And then finally, we'll do a photometric study as this is all getting completed to identify it where we need to actually add lights. And then, so this enhances livability, increases public safety, it protects investments. New developers come in, they don't want to build new, their brand new facilities into a really dark area. And it fosters a better environment for economic development. And then the Riverside Golf Course Greens Renovation Project. This one will apply to the Travel Tourism Outdoor Recreation NOFO. This one is 1.364 million, 75-25 cost share. So the federal share will be a little over $1 million and the city share $341,200. This is going to reconstruct the greens to meet the USGA recommendations. As you know, our greens have drainage issues. It causes rot. I haven't learned quite as much about greens yet as I have about city lighting, but as I understand it, the evaluator on the greens was surprised that they're in as good a shape as they are. And then, of course, we're going to repave the golf course staging area, add some ADA compliant golf carts. I've had a lot of email exchanges with our golf pro who's told me that this has the potential to double our profit from the golf course over the next 8 years. It will increase sports tourism. The addition of ADA compliant carts will increase our ADA opportunity for outdoor recreation. And I think that it will have some other benefits just in terms of local impact. And we're still kind of working through that portion of the economic development. And then Jesus has a bit of an update on some other potential projects.
Sure. So you may recall that there's a few other infrastructure-related projects that we are assessing on whether they make sense to submit for a grant as well. A couple of those projects, urban engineering is helping us with some pre-engineering work. They're looking at potentially adding a road that would connect the future interstate or current US 59 to Business 59 to allow for easier access to the airport. That specific pre-engineering project is on hold simply due to the complexities of crossing a railroad. And so there's a lot of things that have caused that specific pre-engineering project to hit the pause button. However, they have proceeded with continuing to look at enhancing water and sewer utilities along the I-69 corridor. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting this afternoon with Urban to discuss that. And more than likely, we'll be making a decision on whether it would be competitive to submit a grant for that project or not. It's important to keep in mind with that utility project, it becomes a little more complex because of the potential for easement acquisition, which creates, an extra level of complexity with the grant process and even just the administration piece of it. But nonetheless, at a meeting in December, we'll plan to have a further discussion with you on that project. As it relates to broadband, you may recall that Derek has suggested that there's other sources of funds associated for broadband, specifically through COVID-19 Capital Fund that is available. And there's obviously some other funds that are coming down the pipeline with the new infrastructure bill that was signed today, I believe it was, or yesterday. And so more than likely, we will not be submitting a grant through the EDA specifically for broadband and prioritizing some of the other grant opportunities for broadband.
Just to be clear, though, you're not proposing building anything that looks exactly like that anywhere in Victoria, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. For everybody looking at that and saying, where's that going?
Right. All right. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have on any of the projects.
On the lighting grant, a couple of questions I have. Number one was, I didn't see where exactly kind of the plan was to lay out, and maybe I missed it.
Whole city.
Yeah, it's the entire city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's all the lighting
correct.
in the
Yes.
city? Okay. And when you said AEP providing assistance on this, what's
Well,
their role in this?
Their role is they own the lights, and they're the ones who are going to be doing the work.
Okay.
So we will have a contribution and aid agreement with them to complete this project.
Gotcha. And then one other question I had on the downtown sidewalk project. If we go forward with the tax reinvestment, tax increment reinvestment zone, is that something that can be reimbursed, our match by the city? Can that be reimbursed out of that fund?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yeah.
do we need to do anything ahead of time to identify that is a potential to do, or we can just?
Not for this grant, because technically the TERS isn't created yet. And so in the moment that we submit the grant, we can't stipulate in the grant application that any funds would be reimbursed through the TERS because it doesn't exist yet.
Okay,
But ultimately, when it comes time to, and hopefully we do get the grant, when it comes down to administering it, we would have a conversation with you and the TERS board, if it's set up, on how to schedule a reimbursement payment.
okay,
And on that topic, in December, when we have our workshop, that's when we'll have a conversation with you about plugging in all of these matches so that we can account for the scenario of getting all the grants, which would be amazing, but obviously unlikely that we get all of them. But at the same time, we want to properly plan in our CIP for the scenario of us getting all the grants. And so that piece we'll discuss in December.
Right. You good, Mr. Lofgren?
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conley. All right, back to item, let's see, E2. Need a motion, one way or the other.
I'll move to adopt E2.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion about the citywide LED street lighting project grant? No? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. E3.
Item E3 is a resolution authorizing an application to the Economic Development Administration's Economic Adjustment Assistance Program in an approximate amount of $5 million for the Downtown Sidewalk Improvement Project, committing city match requirement and identifying the source of funding for the match.
I move we adopt E3. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. E4.
Item E4 is a resolution authorizing an application to the Economic Development Administration's Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation Program in an approximate amount of $1,364,000 for the Riverside Golf Course Greens Renovation Project, committing city match requirement and identifying the source of funding for the match.
Move to adopt E4.
Pardon me. A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on E4. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E5.
Item E5 is a resolution adopting the 2021 Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening, Mr. Alfaro.
I've got an entourage here with me, but nonetheless, we do have our Parks and Recreation Master Plan that we wanted to present to you tonight for, hopefully for formal adoption. But I also brought Mr. Lee Keeling, who is our chair for the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as Christian Lentz, who's the project planner for Half Associates. He does have a very, very brief presentation if you would like to go into that. But nonetheless, I'd like to let Lee have the floor real quickly.
Mayor Balknight, members of council, it's been a long several months that the Parks Commission has been involved in this Parks and Recreation Master Plan project that we're undertaking. It's something that the commission is very, very excited about and is very proud to bring to you today and recommend that council approve the plan. You're going to hear a little bit more about the plan in detail from Christian at Half and Associates. He can kind of update you and answer questions that I'm sure you'll have. But I think one thing that you'll appreciate when you take the time to look at this plan is that you'll see that this is a very, very deep dive into what we have, what our community would like to see. It attempts to match those things up, and it goes into how we do things, and it gives us a lot of suggestions about how we can look at that and see if we can improve the way we do a lot of things. It's a challenging plan. There's a lot there for all of us. The commission's excited to be able to continue to work with council to get the plan, make the plan a living, working document that lets us implement and improve the parks, our park situation around the entire city. A lot of the plan is devoted to equity and how we can improve the distribution of these park resources across the community. It's an area I'm particularly excited about. So anyway, we're excited to bring this to you. I know you'll have questions for Mr. Lentz, and very happy to present the plan to council. Thanks for having us.
Mr. Keating, thank you so much for leading the Parks Commission through this process and for all the Parks Commissioners. I know it's been long, but it's a very nice master plan. Listen to all the input, especially when we did our joint meeting together on Riverside Park. There was a bunch of input, and it was well taken, well received, and I think we have a better product at the end of it. But thank y'all for all y'all's hard work on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, thank you, sir. And here we have Christian Lentz here as well, sir. And if you would like a quick presentation, or we can just roll into questions, however you would like.
Quick presentation sounds great.
This one right here. Mayor, members of council, thank you for having me yet again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Some of the presentation slides I'll provide you this evening. These are things you've already seen, but certainly it's helpful to get this information in the record so the general public understands what's in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So, of course, what this plan addresses, as you all are well acquainted with now, the master plan is intended to provide you with your vision or your guide for how your parks and recreation system will grow and develop over the next 20 years, 10 to 20 years, and also how you're going to provide recreational services to the residents of your community. As I've told you before, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is prepared in accordance with recommended standards by the Texas Department of Parks and Wildlife, so that it actually puts you in a better position in the future to receive grants from the department. In addition to that, and in addition to a typical parks system master plan, your parks master plan also includes some very specific conceptual design plans for 3 parks within your park system as well. As you're well aware now, this is a process that's occurred over the course of the last year in conjunction with a lot of the other master planning efforts that have taken place in Victoria. From the very beginning, just about this time last year is when we got started developing a vision, and then going out through the spring and summer, assessing existing conditions and preparing initial recommendations. There was different types of stakeholder outreach, public outreach throughout the planning process, including interviews with many of you or most of you up there on the dais, focus group meetings, online surveys, both to ask questions about the overall park system or impressions about the 3 specific parks for which the conceptual plans were prepared, town hall meetings, a public information booth. And as you're also well aware, of course, we've worked on this in conjunction and under the oversight of the Parks and Recreation Commission throughout the last year. Your master plan has taken 9 goals that were originally in your 2012 plan and reduced that down to 4 specific goals, the first of which deals with how you're going to grow and develop your park system in the future as your population grows. The second goal involves how you are going to maintain and improve your park system assets, your recreational assets. The third goal refers to your plan for future community programming and events that will be conducted in Victoria. And finally, the fourth goal deals with all those other administrative operations and maintenance issues that you consider when you're considering how you can effectively deliver recreation services to the community. There's over 60 recommended actions in the Parks and Recreation Work Program, including ways you might change how you operate on a day-to-day basis, regulations, policies, and programs. But also there's a series, a fairly long list of what we term near park system investments, or these are basically investments that should be made in the near term to actually improve the condition of your existing park properties. The plan recommends that you maintain the target levels of service for parkland acreage in regional, community, and neighborhood parks, but it also adds a recommendation that you seek to try to provide neighborhood parks and multi-use trails within a 1/2 mile or a 10-minute walk shed of all residential areas. The park plan also includes a target level of service for recreational facilities, identifies some very common recreational facilities that you would see in most municipal park system, and gives you a target to try to attain in regard to the number of facilities you might offer in your system, or in some cases, like with skate parks or community centers, recommended square footages. As I've said before when we've met, these target levels of service are always aspirational, they're always advisory, they give you that direction to shoot for. Some key recommendations throughout the plan include the recommendation for updates to your land development regulations to include parkland dedication standards. In addition to the conceptual plans that were prepared for 3 other parks, there are recommendations for the improvement or expansion of Lone Tree Creek Park. Throughout the system, we recommend improvements to walking facilities within a 1/4 mile of each one of your parks. It also considers how you might monitor and manage the types of recreational programs that you're offering as you move forward. And the deal has a number of actions that deal with the way you maintain or you schedule maintenance of all of your park system assets. And how, in addition to that, how you may also develop specific standards that allow you to determine in advance what type of design features or aesthetic features you want to incorporate into your park system across the system to have a uniform aesthetic and look. I'll end with just a couple more slides on the conceptual development plans. As you're well aware, 3 conceptual development plans were prepared. And the parks that were chosen for those plans were chosen because they represent 3 different classifications or 3 different types of parks in your community and in most municipal park system. They were also chosen because of their different scale or size and also how they were distributed around the different parts of the community. The plans that were prepared propose a series of upgrades, improvements, enhancements, new amenities to those parks to redevelop them according to what we call complete parks. And complete parks essentially considers 5 different attributes that you want to incorporate into park redevelopment and park redesign. We're really enthusiastic about the plan that's been prepared. I'll say we were really enthusiastic about having worked with your Parks and Recreation Department over the last year. They've been a really great partner to work with. This is really, the recommendations that are included in this plan are rather ambitious, but I will tell you that all of the, so many other communities, your peer communities throughout Texas are also being very ambitious about the parks and the recreational services that they offer. So we feel that although the plan is, as we would say, ambitious, that also it's a way for you to not only ensure that you're providing for the long-term quality of life for your residents, but also that you're keeping up with those other communities and trying to attract long-term investment and growth to your community. So I'm certainly happy to take any questions you have, or perhaps Jason can answer a few too.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Y'all have any further questions for Mr. Lentz? Thank you for putting this plan together for us. Really appreciate it and look forward to using it to improve our park system and grow it. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we have item E5. Oh, you're good?
I moved we adopt E5.
I second it.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on it? Mr. Alfaro, I didn't thank you specifically too, but thank you for also leading the department through this effort.
Absolutely, my
And the
pleasure.
city, the rest of us. So, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Passes. Item E6.
Item E6 is a resolution requesting an audit of Victoria County Central Appraisal District processes and valuations.
Mr. Mayor, I do not have a presentation on this item tonight. At your request, this item has been brought back pursuant to the discussion led by Mr. Crocker at the last meeting.
Do we have a motion?
I move we adopt.
Second it.
Well, this is a resolution to, request an audit or third-party review of the processes, right? I encourage everybody to speak to the other taxing entities that also help fund the appraisal district so that they may also provide a resolution requesting this audit. And hopefully then the board can vote on it and approve of doing such an audit. But thanks for bringing this to us, Mr. Crocker.
Appreciate your support.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We're done with item E6 and into city manager report.
All right, so I have an hour-long presentation scheduled for tonight, because there's no way we're getting out before 7. I'm just kidding. I do want to go through a few slides just summarizing the downtown master plan, just to provide some context as to why we're even having a conversation about the tax increment reinvestment zone. And really the big thing that I want to highlight about the downtown master plan is the fact that this is the community's downtown master plan. And I want to remind you and everyone about the process that Friesen Nichols and staff undertook in order to achieve some of that feedback. And it started with the creation of a downtown advisory committee, which met several times. There were online surveys. We had information on our website, and obviously plenty of information being spread on social media as well. Through the survey process, we received nearly 750 responses. And you can kind of see, and as a refresher, what are some of the things that came out of that process, ranging from wanting better entertainment, restaurants, shopping, businesses, you name it. On the right-hand side, there are some categories that we were able to sort of glean from that: public spaces, tourism, dining and entertainment, arts and culture, connectivity and safety, and housing. And so all of that not only came from the professionals involved with the exercise, but also our residents. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. one of the elements of the downtown master plan was making recommendations on catalytic projects, which in other words were projects that could have spin-off effects and sort of serve as what kicks hopefully a snowball effect. This rendering here is reflective of all of the catalytic projects that were identified in the plan. I won't go through every single one, but I do want to highlight the ones that have nice renderings attached to them. And so the first being the new Grande entrance to downtown at the intersection of Maine and Rio Grande. We've discussed this. As a matter of fact, the EDA grant for the sidewalk improvement that we will be submitting for will help us achieve this look of the paved sidewalks going all the way to Rio Grande, as well as the trees. This specific vision also accounts for the gateway entrance signs to downtown, which of course are huge in establishing a sense of place, which in urban planning is a big deal. And this also accounts for some improvements to 700 Main, as well as improvements with other buildings surrounding 700 Main that look better on this image than they do in real life. Another suggestion came in respect to the library, which in essence is just continuing to activate some of the exterior spaces. We actually also applied for a grant to help hire an architect that's specific to libraries to potentially help us actually design what's suggested here, which is an entrance facing Main Street so that we can better connect the more activity that we're trying to have on Main Street to the library, as opposed to right now, it doesn't quite feel that way. And from what I understand, it used to be that way. And I don't know at what specific point that changed, but we want to bring that back, but better. And so we're having conversations about that. Of course, one of the big ones is associated with De Leon Plaza and the idea of extending the plaza while also adding some amenities to the plaza, such as public restrooms, which on this image is the little building behind the Six Flags monument. This also accounts for either full or partial closure of Forest Street to account for just creating a more pedestrian space. There are obviously still opportunity to have food trucks go in. Obviously, it's where we set up the stage, but really just creating a safer space for people to gather around De Leon Plaza. This is just another look of downtown if it were to have some of the improvements that we also have incorporated into the grant, such as the lighting. We recognize that one of the issues that was identified in the plan is the safety aspect of it, or the perceived lack of safety, which lighting plays a big role in helping that. And so you notice in this image that it's not only the lights going across Main Street, but there's also an intentional effort in bringing to life the first floor of these buildings through windows and graphics and signage and activating rooftops where possible to really just create some more additional development opportunities. And no, I won't say it, Dwayne. I won't.
I was waiting for it.
Not in this setting. I won't say it in this setting. Ultimately, there was a very specific list of 10 highest impact projects and 10 easy wins, which could be summarized through a combination of operational and maintenance enhancements that we can make, as well as some capital improvements, such as the sidewalk improvements that we're applying for a grant for, as well as the ones associated with De Leon Plaza. These are all identified as impact project and easy wins. I won't go through each one. This is just a refresher. But this is a good segue into then having a conversation about, well, how do we fund these things? And I think it's important to remind ourselves on just the different avenues before I go into specifics with the TERS option, because we already have sources of funds that could help achieve our objective, from the Sales Tax Development Corporation to hotel occupancy tax dollars. Obviously, you're very familiar with those, but we have those. We're fortunate to have those. Not every community has a Type B Economic Development Corporation. Not every community is able to bring in $1.6 to $1.9 million a year in hot tax revenue, right? And so we're fortunate and blessed to be able to have these. But nonetheless, that's an option. We also are all familiar with the opportunities for tax abatements or other incentive agreements under the 380 capability. I won't go into that, but obviously that's an option for us to help spur, especially some of the private development and some of the catalytic projects that aren't necessarily on public-owned land. We potentially would need to incentivize some of that. Then, of course, there is the TERS and the PID, which I'll go briefly here in a second, more so on the TERS. And specific to the TERS, we hired a consultant, Travis James, you've met him, with TXP, decades of experience in this field, is constantly helping communities establish tax increment reinvestment zones. That's why he's not here today, because he's helping another community set one up today. And so he helped us put some information together that I'd like to share with you. I know some of this is repetitive, but I think it's important to have a refresher. Tax increment reinvestment zone is a tool that local governments can use to finance public improvements. The additional revenue is received from the properties refers to the tax increment, so it's important to note that this is not a new tax. And that's here. So it's not an increase in tax rate, so I want to just make that clear. It's related to the increment. We all know that values grow every year, and consequently, the revenue that comes from that increase in value goes into our general fund or an INS rate. And so the idea of the TERS is to create an increment and reallocate those funds into a fund specific to the area referred to as the tax increment reinvestment zone. And this can help provide additional funds for projects. It could help better just reduce our need to issue debt. And I'll get into that in a future slide when we have a conversation about potential debt impact. But if there was a way to try and explain it with a graph or image, this would be the best way to try and do that in terms of how a tax increment reinvestment zone works. And in essence, at the moment that it's established, it takes the most recent value. So for example, if we establish it this calendar year, it would take the 2021 values, and that would be what's in blue, or what looks to be blue on the screen. Then obviously over time, the values of those properties within the tax increment reinvestment zone increase. That's referred to as the tax increment, and that's what you could see as like an orange color. And that part in the orange color is what goes into the fund. Typically, TERSs are set up for a 20 to 25-year period, and so at the conclusion, communities have options to either continue them or end it, and then all of that money now goes into the general fund. And so it's intended to help achieve an objective, which is to help fund improvements, which is what we're trying to do, thanks to the downtown master plan. Any questions on that so far? I hope I'm making sense.
Say it's the captured appraised value, the increase in appraised value only? Because if the taxes went up, the amount of taxes you would collect from that property would go up, whether the appraised value went up or not. So it doesn't matter what the tax rate is, it's just the value of the property?
Correct. It's based off of value. And I'll hit on that when we get to the scenario.
But it's value times the tax rate.
Correct. Yeah, but
That's how you get your revenue, so it's.
But as an example, if, let's say, so I'll get to a slide that shows that the value is $67 million, and I'll answer your question in a different way when I show that
But this
slide.
graph, right, it mixes value and revenue.
Right, and obviously there's a relationship between the two.
There's a relationship, but.
Yeah. And the part that we can control is obviously the rate. But typically, the value is consistent, dependable, and is there, right? In any case, I'll come back to your question when I show that other slide. Okay, so moving on. One of the first questions that comes about when we talk about establishing a tax increment reinvestment zone, aside from the financial piece, is, well, what can you use the money for? And it's really two buckets. There's some capital expenditures and some operating expenditures that the money can be used for. This summarizes from a legal standpoint what all capital expenditures one can use the money for, ranging from acquisition of property to construction of public works projects to literally demolishing buildings or renovating them. Creating grant programs such as the existing facade grant program that we have already. And really just anything that we can do to get property moving to ultimately increase the value of the property, the undeveloped property. On the operating side, we can use them for organizational type of expenditures, professional service costs. We can use them for really just anything associated with helping the running of the operation for downtown. And I think this is an important time to kind of make the point that what we expect to be able to use the TERS for is helping supplement the operation of our Main Street program, because obviously all the recommendations that came through the downtown master plan aren't solely just about the capital improvement expense of fixing a sidewalk, but also the need to invest more money on the operational side so that we can have more events downtown, we can have potentially additional grant programs downtown, and really just improve all aspects of downtown. So it's important to note that that's our intent, as well as what Councilmember Crocker suggested earlier, and where possible, help support some small-scale capital improvement project. I think it would be unrealistic to expect the TERS to pay for every single capital improvement project associated with downtown, because quite frankly, as you'll see in a few slides, there's just not enough money going into the TERS to help cover some of the larger capital improvement projects that might be associated with downtown, but definitely some of the smaller scale, like the match for the grant program, potentially maybe, some improvements at DeLeon Plaza is probably reasonable. But if we ever got to the point to having to do some type of complete, street reconstruction type of project for downtown, that would just be cost prohibitive to expect the TERS to help pay for something like that.
I have a question on that. So when you say that the TERS would supplement those, is the idea that eventually the TERS would be the funding mechanism for the things you're talking about from an organizational standpoint?
Potentially it could, right? It would take a little while to build up the revenue in the TERS.
Right.
And so it wouldn't be something that would be even feasible to do, the first year. But once we start getting into years 3 and 5, that would be a worthwhile conversation to have if it's appropriate to simply just transfer, if you will, the expenditures of Main Street fully to the TERS and kind of pull it away from hotel occupancy tax, which is where it comes from now.
Right.
That would be feasible. I'm just reluctant to kind of say fully that that's going to be able to happen on day one.
Sure.
Because it will take several years for the TERS to build up an annual revenue that would be consistent with what would be needed for the operation of Main Street. As an example, currently it's roughly $300,000.
Right.
And we probably, in the model that Travis has put together, we wouldn't hit $300,000 in revenue into the TERS until like year 5 or 6. Now, granted, that's a very conservative model that he's put together that I'll share with you, but it'll take some time for that to build up.
I just look at, if we're gonna, if we put this TERS together, that at some point, I would like to see it be really the catalyst for downtown instead of another supplement or another pot for downtown, that this would really be downtown coming together. What happens in downtown supports downtown through these programs and that sort of thing. So I'm glad to hear, but obviously I realize this isn't a first year thing. It is going to take time. So
Right.
I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and what's exciting about the potential to do that is the ripple effect that could have, right? Because if we can get to a point where the TERS can fully support the Main Street operation, as an example, well, then that frees up money on the hotel occupancy tax side to potentially be able to do more with our Convention Visitors Bureau, or more with the community center or sports tourism and some of the other things that we can utilize that money for, right? And so what's exciting about what you pose is the ripple effect of that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question somebody would ask is, well, how do you set it up? And first off, we obviously need to identify the area, and I'll share a map with you here shortly. But after we go through that, it's required to set up a financing plan, which we are in the process of setting up. Eventually, when it's set up, we need to have a public hearing. And part of the setting up of a tax increment reinvestment zone is establishing a governing body or a board that could be, on the minimum side, 5 people or max 15. If we go down that path, I would recommend keeping it small and easy and manageable. This project plan and financing plan, as I mentioned, is part of the legal requirement, and so that's part of what we're working on. Typically at this stage, these project plans and financing plans are very generic intentionally, because we want to make sure that we have as much flexibility as possible with what the TERS has the capabilities of doing. And so even though we have the intent, as I mentioned earlier, about, looking at supplementing operations, doing some minor maintenance and some capital projects, we want to make sure that we are flexible as much as possible in our plan to ensure that, 5, 10 years from now, things might be different and there might be an appetite or there might be the money to do something different than what we originally started off doing. So don't be surprised when we share the plan with you in the near future that it's going to be intentionally broad. So this is a map showing the area. This gives you a sense of the uses that are within this geographic boundary. You'll see that, I don't know how the colors appear on your screen, but you could very easily tell that we have a lot of land that's owned by religious organizations. That's the purple. You can see the city is red, the county is blue, and you can kind of take it from there. But you get a sense of the mix of the uses along this area. And one thing to keep in mind, which I know we're all familiar with, but the public may not be, is city, county, school district, federal, and church don't pay property taxes. And so when we break it down in this type of a table, you'll see that 45 acres out of the 139 are not contributing to the tax rolls of the city, county, or really anybody. We put this table together intentionally, including the county, the college district, and the navigation district, because one of the unique opportunities about establishing a tax increment reinvestment zone is that you can have other taxing jurisdictions participate. And this creates a very unique opportunity because normally, if we were to just, let's say, not have the TERS and try and, let's say, do that sidewalk project that we're trying to get a grant for, our only options would be to issue a CO. If we have the cash, just pay as you go with the project, but we would be the only ones that would be financially contributing to that project. And so by establishing a TERS, you have other entities that are contributing some of their own future dollars to the TERS. And so now that sidewalk improvement is an expense that's shared across the board with other entities and not just on the shoulders of the city. And so that creates a very, very exciting opportunity. And we've had an opportunity to speak with the county, Victoria College, and the port, and we're all continuing in their respective processes to request that they participate.
Why does single family?
Great question. So the single family, because the exemptions are different. So the exemptions for each of these taxing jurisdictions would look slightly different. So for example, there are some exemptions that only apply to city taxes, but don't apply to, county or vice versa. So there's some nuances in the laws there that change that figure. So let's talk through a couple of scenarios. So we wanted to intentionally run a scenario that included all of these potential partners so that we can potentially have a best case scenario for you to talk about. And so what we did and what Travis did was he said, okay, let's say for argument's sake, we set up the tax increment reinvestment zone for 25 years. Like I said, we have all entities participating at 100%. We maintain the tax rate constant, and I'll come back to that in a little later as well. Let's assume a 2.5% increase year over year. And let's also assume that every year there's new development to the tune of $100,000, which is pretty conservative. If you think about, somebody just popping up a building or renovating a building, it's more than likely that new growth is going to be greater than 100,000. But we wanted to be very conservative with our cost estimates so that, we rather obviously outperform the projection than underperform the projection. And so we feel very confident that we'll outperform this projection. But taking that into account, and again, all entities contributing at 100%, over a 25-year period, this could potentially yield almost $9 million. And again, this is because of participation of the other entities. And you'll see there that, if the city were to go at it alone, it would be less than half of that. So it's a really big deal to try and get our partners into the fold. Now, to my point earlier, if there's a $5 to $10 million capital improvement project that's needed in downtown, as you can see, the TERS potentially may not be able to absorb that expense at 100%. So we need to be realistic with what potentially could come out of the TERS versus not. Now, one of the questions that I know some of you have had in respect to this is, well, what impact would this have on debt capacity? And Gilbert put this together to kind of showcase some of that. So on the bottom, I guess the number here to look at would be the red, right? And so that the red would be what we would be, I guess, leaving on the table as it relates to debt capacity by the future portion of the INS rate within the TERS boundary going to the TERS versus going to our traditional INS fund. If you were to add all those up, it's close to $700,000. Now, one might say, okay, well, what if you only did M&O, right? We don't like that it's impacting our debt capacity. We don't want to lose out on that $700,000. So let's just have a conversation about just contributing the M&O, not the INS rate. So we ran that scenario too. And if we pull out the INS, you'll see that over that same period, the projection under the same scenario goes down to 6.6, which is a decrease of about $2.3 million. And so on one hand, sure, we're giving up $700,000 in debt, but if we don't include it, we get $2.3 million less into the TERS, right? And so obviously from a financial standpoint, it's better to include the INS into the TERS because again, we're getting the money from every other partner, not just the city. And so in this conversation about impact on debt, while we are leaving some debt on the table, keep in mind that it's better to do that and include the INS rate and establish the TERS because A, the TERS is not issuing any debt, and B, it's cash not only from the city, but from some other entity, from other entities. Any questions on that?
And can the TERS be set up with the restriction that it does not have the ability to issue debt?
Yeah, like Promise to the Voters 2.0. I mean,
because you said that's based on
Sure.
TERS not issuing debt.
Correct. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I can ask Travis if there's a way to somehow, attach that to the plan, or I'd have to ask Travis on that piece. Obviously, our recommendation would be to not, so that we keep as much flexibility as possible over the years. And I know that we've discussed that our intent is to not issue debt, because it really isn't. Our intent is to, again, supplement operations, help expand on the grant programs that we have downtown, like the facade grant program, and then do some small scale capital improvement projects, pay-as-you-go type concept.
But even if the TERS wish to do debt, it would have to be okay by the city council.
Correct, yeah, great point. So ultimately, functionally, this would work similar to how the Sales Tax Development Corporation works, which is it's a separate legal entity, establishes a budget, ultimately gets approved by council, same thing. So the TERS board would get together more than likely once a quarter. They would discuss, their budget once a year, and then potentially discuss expenditures, and then we would ultimately bring that to council for final approval. Even though we have other entities participating, because the city is the one establishing the TERS, the city has ultimate ability to sign off on the expenditures of the TERS. With these other entities participating in the TERS, they'll have a seat at the table on the board. And so that'll which entities participate or not will play a factor in how big of a board we have and who gets appointed to the board. Because legally, let's say if the county chooses to participate, legally they need to have one seat on the board, and same for college and navigation district. Thank you for the question. One other thing that we wanted to look at too was saying, okay, well, what if we decrease the tax rate? And the scenario we came up with was 2% annually. In this particular case, we only looked at decreasing the city's tax rate, not everybody else's. We could obviously run the scenario to include everybody, and really we could run any scenario, possible. And I'm happy to send you the raw file if you want to, review the data run different scenarios, yourself, happy to do that. But in this instance, by decreasing the city tax rate 2% annually over that 25-year period, it actually drops the city's piece to $3 million from, it was at 4. Yeah, it was at 4.2. And so it drops it to 3. I think I forgot to change that last number on that slide. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. I was going to say Aggie math, but I can't say that. Right? Anyway, so where we are with it, as I alluded to earlier, we are having conversations with the different partners, trying to educate them on the TERS so that hopefully they can consider joining as partners into the tax increment reinvestment zone. This upcoming Monday, I'll be making a presentation to County Commissioners Court, going over the downtown master plan and introducing the topic of the tax increment reinvestment zone. Last week, Danielle and I had an opportunity to visit with the Navigation District at their board meeting, and we made a similar presentation, and they verbalized full support. And so we're working with them to potentially have an agreement for their consideration as soon as their meeting in December, if we're able to do that. Victoria College, we had a successful meeting with their executive council as well. And they're also interested in seeing some examples of some MOUs, and we envision an opportunity to discuss with their full board December, January timeframe. It's important to note that we do need to establish the TERS by the end of the calendar year if we want to use the 21 appraised values as a starting point. If we wait until January or February to set it up, we'd have to use the 22. And so we want to obviously take advantage of doing it as soon as possible. To that end, we, as the creators of the TERS, are the only ones that need to be on board by the end of the calendar year. So the county, the Navigation District, Victoria College, they can join in January, February. It doesn't impact that piece of it. So I want to make that distinction, that the time clock, if there's interest in pursuing with this, is more really on us. And so what we'd like to do is have a public education session on November 30th, where we can invite the public in a different setting other than council so they can learn about the TERS. Danielle has planned sending out invitations to all of the different property owners that would be within the boundary of the TERS. And we would also open it up citywide for those that are interested in just learning more about it. So we plan on having that on Tuesday morning, November 30th. And if after tonight's conversation, after that conversation, there's continued interest and support for the TERS, we'd like to recommend that we bring it forward officially on December 7th for the public hearing and the first reading, and then have the final reading on December 14th, so that we can knock it out by the end of the calendar year. And with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Can you put the slide back up that had single family, family? The scenarios were developed. Commercial doesn't seem to rise very much. I've looked over the last few years. In fact, there are years where it went down. We have a hurricane, for example. Commercial, that value, the biggest value in this chart could take a big hit. I just want everybody to understand that. It's not necessarily, it's hard to predict how much money you're going to have in the future.
It is, which is why we want to take a very conservative approach to it. And to your comment about, commercial maybe not increasing as rapid as maybe single family, the scenario was run at 2.5%, sort of at the aggregate level. And so that's how we kind of funneled that into it. To go back to the previous question that you had asked earlier, so when we set it up, it's actually based off of the value. So if the value is 67 million, and let's just say for argument's sake, we set it up and that's what it is. And let's say there is a hurricane or another natural disaster of some kind that impacts values next year or the year after that, that drops the values below 67 million, nothing goes into the TERS. So the TERS, the increment is based off of that total base at the beginning of 67. And so if there ever is a year where, it does go below 67, then none of it goes into the TERS. Because it is based off of value.
So tonight, do you need some type of direction from council that you would like to see us proceed on with the next steps?
Ideally, yes.
Could you go to your last slide again?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So,
I think we should proceed.
yeah, so our portions are in red, right?
Correct.
And I know you've been visiting with other taxing entities, and thank you for doing that. Something I'd still like to proceed with. I don't know that it's going to be some huge number for us in the future, but like I said, it can help with some things, and I'm interested to see what it can do. And the city council can terminate it at any time.
Yeah, there's flexibility around that. And, you know, I could have added, you know, some more slides kind of just trying to sell it. But I think it's important to also keep in mind that if our intention is to redevelop downtown, and if we put ourselves in the shoes of an investor or a property owner downtown, and we're asking them to clean up their property, you know, fix up your facade, you know, whatever it is, we have a better chance at achieving success at that by reassuring them that we have money set aside specifically to ensure that, you know, the sidewalk in front of their property is in good shape. Classic example, if you've been to the new Chick-fil-A office space in downtown, they asked that we redo the sidewalk in front of the building, and we were able to make that work. And so, you know, and we only foresee this type of work or requests or needs increasing as Danielle continues to just do a great job with the Main Street program. And so it's important to have the money set aside so that from the developer standpoint, they see that this is important enough for us to put the money aside to ensure that the money's there for any improvement or maintenance that might be needed to ensure their success.
Well, I think it's a great program. It's certainly been around for a while. It's good to me to see Victoria jump on that bandwagon. I think it'll be great for downtown, and frankly, I don't want to get off of the schedule here, but there are other parts in town that I think we might also consider looking at in the future, depending on how this one goes. But I'm in favor of it.
I agree. I think it has a lot of potential. It gives Victoria vision and gives citizens of Victoria hope for improvement.
I like the concept of it just it's downtown, staying in downtown. And, you know, I think these numbers are pretty conservative, and I see this actually freeing up money for some other things too. And I've referred to it somewhere cruelly as an eat what you kill plan from the standpoint that downtown can rise and fall on its own merits, which I like a lot. So I like this program.
Fantastic.
Great.
I think you got
Got
your
it.
good
Thank you.
direction for you there.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any need for executive session
No,
tonight?
sir.
All right, then this meeting is adjourned.
No executive session.